All right, guys, our favorite time of the week again when we get to answer a few of your questions. Saagar, what is up first?
Number one, Robert Haddix. Will the internet change campaign finance? Do you think the internet will change the amount of money required to run for office? Right now, a huge amount of the money raised by candidates used for ads on TV. As more and more people start to cut the cord, it seems like those ads will become less relevant. Running for office could not actually get significantly cheaper. Interesting question. What do you think?
That is an interesting question. I don't think it will get cheaper. I think it will just shift
to Facebook.
Yeah, well, into the metaverse or whatever the next big thing is. And part of why there is a real stickiness to the percentage of the campaign budget going to TV ads is because that's where the consultants make the bulk of their money.
Yeah, right.
So now you do have, a lot that goes out direct mail, which I know you also are thinking like, who even pays attention to that? But you got to remember, the electorate in terms of who shows up continues to skew more older. So they tend to watch TV and watch the commercials more. They tend to actually look at their mail more often. I do think it is becoming more and more difficult to effectively advertise. And then the other thing is that just like, there isn't a lot of great evidence even at this point that these ads are all that effective. So that's part of part of the dynamic there is these races are all so nationalized that, individual candidate quality and what you're saying and what your opponent's saying and the debate and the idea, the marketplace of ideas, especially below the Senate level, is not really a thing. So I actually think the most impactful thing in terms of the higher level offices where people are paying a little bit more attention is like earned media and buzz and news reports. That's kind of one of the things that Trump understood, is that it was far more impactful what he was getting the media to cover and respond to him and react to him than whatever campaign organization and ads that he was putting out already.
I gotta say, this is very interesting. Dr. Oz has actually not spent $1 on any digital ads. So it'll be a very interesting test case of, do they matter at all?
Yeah.
Actually, genuinely, I have no idea. I think.
But then Fetterman has done a great job of getting the media to cover him and creating, with very little money, social media buzz.
But he also has a hell of a lot of money, right? So he's raised like tens of millions of dollars. I think he's outstripped Oz by like almost 4 or 5 times. So anyway, the question is will it matter at all? My opinion is that politics lags almost 30 years behind like normal times, just because the people who vote are old. And so, look, like you said, direct mail still matters a lot. Consultants all matters a lot. I don't think the consultants have yet figured out how to scheme their money out of their candidates as well as they have in the TV markets on digital.
Correct.
So we'll see how that works in the future. I honestly, I despair on these things. But I think in the long run, you're not wrong. It's just that, look, old people vote. So the way that candidates are going to spend their money is going to disproportionately target them. And until that changes, it's going to be years while that governs our system.
Yes, indeed. All right, next question. Jeremy Peel, ratings. Is there any possibility Breaking Points can, in the future, discuss ratings as it pertains to the show? Would love to know the analytics of listeners, if possible, how many people are paid subscribers versus not, et cetera, et cetera. There you go.
All right, so since you asked nicely, and it's just all of you, I pulled up our lifetime numbers. This will be fun. Lifetime. So in the lifetime of Breaking Points, since we launched, so I guess we created the channel on April 7th, 2021, when we were leaving the Hill, and we officially launched in June. We have had 252 million views, 830,000 subscribers. In terms of our audience, this is on YouTube, by the way. The podcast data is not as good, but we've had on the podcast, I would say, just doing the math quickly in my head, probably 100 million or so downloads. Then let's look here at returning viewers. So in the last 90 days, we've had 2 million returning viewers. We've had 4 million unique viewers. We've got like 30,000 new subscribers in the last night. The subscriber number has ticked down recently. I don't really know why.
I think that's all about who YouTube serves your stuff to. I mean, that's all about like, are they showing your things to new people or are they not? So,
So, top geographies over the last 90 days, 77% from the United States, 6% from Canada, 2% from the UK, 1.7% from Australia, 0.9% from India. Thank you, India. Really popping up. What else we got here? In terms of age, these are fun ones. So really, in terms of 18 to 24, it's, 25 to 34 is like 35%, 35 to 44 is another 40%, and the rest are basically either Gen Z or they're like older Gen X. So it continues to be a Gen Z / millennial show, predominantly. Some Gen X people / older millennials also listen as well. What else is interesting? Other channels that our audience watches. These are always fun. Joe Rogan, The Jimmy Dore Show, Russell Brand, Kyle Kalinske, The Hill, Real Time with Bill Maher, Tim Pool, Lex Friedman, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh.
All over the friggin' map.
Memology 101. I don't know who you are.
I don't know what that one is.
You
might have to check it out.
Pat McAfee as well. So don't let anybody say that anybody defines us in terms of our
whole
audience.
Spectrum.
Right. In terms of the other videos our audience watch, Krystal, number 1 is Chris Rock's comedy post Will Smith incident. And if people want a fun one, here's a fun one. In the last 90 days or 28 days, in terms of the most searched thing by our audience across country, number 1 is Wim Hof breathing techniques. By the way, Wim Hof is a fascinating guy. I'm very interested. But anyway, number 2.
That's a Rogan dude, right?
Well, not
Was
really.
he on?
Well, he was on Rogan. He was on like 5 years ago. Wim Hof is, you would love him. He's a fascinating character. He like really believes in the power of breath.
Yeah, I know a little bit. I know a little bit about
He was the guy who they like injected E. coli into him, and he used the power of breath to activate his immune system. It's actually insane. Like it sounds magical, but it literally happened like in a Stanford lab. The book is Breath by James Nestor. Highly recommend it.
Okay.
Number 2 is Housing Market. Number 3 is
Housing Market has been one of the top ones for a while.
Jordan Peterson Motivation. 4 China Economy. 6 Crimea. 7 Pronouns. 8 Islam. 9 Nihilism. 10 12 Rules for Life. Peterson. So, okay. All right. Well, some Jordan Peterson stuff is going on in there. So there you go. That's some demographic data. Enjoy. Do with it what you will.
Yeah. And in terms of the paid subscribers versus the non-paid, I mean, it's definitely much larger that are in the free category, but the premium paid subscribers, I mean, you guys are like the bedrock of the stability of the finances of the show.
No question.
So
you're
the ones we're really thinking, the most about in programming for.
Exactly. There's a reason that we don't use that search tab in order to promote. Otherwise, we would just do videos about Jordan Peterson all day. So, there you go.
God forbid.
I know. I would rather kill myself. All right.
All right. Next question. I'll ask it because this one is for Saagar. Saagar, books on foreign policy. You talk about favorite foreign policy books and people on the show. What are your top 10 books about U.S. foreign policy?
So I was telling you before, there's no way I have 10 on that. So, okay, let's think about this in terms of the evolution of U.S. foreign policy. So let's talk first with George Washington. So that means I personally would read a book about George Washington. And George Washington, Ron Chernow wrote a great book about George Washington. You should read that in order to think about the foundational Washington in the debates between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson about how to support the French Revolution. So that's number 1. We shall not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. The next is the evolution of the Monroe Doctrine. So Monroe Doctrine, even though it happened under James Monroe, the father of the Monroe Doctrine was John Quincy Adams. So I would read a biography of John Quincy Adams. I want to say A.O. Scott is the person who wrote a biography of John Quincy Adams. From there, in terms of U.S. foreign policy, doesn't really change until Abraham Lincoln. In terms of it's basically England was very supportive of the Confederate South because they got a lot of cotton from them, and there was actually some theories about they were going to possibly endorse the Confederacy in the middle of the war. Well, I mean, you got to remember 1861, 1862, the South is winning, right? So Robert E. Lee is doing really well. But actually, it's Gettysburg where the English were like, okay, we're not going to intervene in this. And they refused to accept like Confederate dignity. This was like a whole thing. We had all these people in Europe being like, the king cannot meet with these Confederate representatives. So anyway, this isn't even a book recommendation, but like Team of Rivals is a good one. They go into a lot of like how Alexander Seward, who was a Secretary of State, had to manage all of that. From there, I guess you in foreign policy, America becomes a great power. So then we have to start to grapple with the imperial age and then Teddy Roosevelt. So The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt has some interesting stuff. Then Woodrow Wilson, obviously World War I changes everything. You can read a million books about World War I. I'm just describing it descriptively. The isolationist period, I would go and read obviously about isolationism and then the rise to World War II. And then the book I recommended the last time around, which basically takes you from then to today, is The Wise Men and the World They Made by Evan Thomas and Walter Isaacson, I want to say. And that's about the post-World War II era. As to where we are today, I can't give you a book because it's honestly too... Actually, Peter Zeihan. There you go. Peter Zeihan's book on geopolitics. That's a good book. So that's like the new age.
I'm reading right now No Ordinary Time about FDR, which has some of the, like, how he manages transitioning from this isolationist instinct, especially post-World War I, to try to ease the American people into supporting the Allies, and ultimately, you know, because there was a lot of his allies among the liberals and like the New Deal coalition who were very reticent about World War II.
People don't realize what it was like at the time. Like the overwhelming popular sentiment of like, we don't want a goddamn thing to do with these Europeans again in the 1930s. Like Senator Robert Taft, and there was, anyway, even
and on the left,
and post-World War II.
There was a lot of concern, including from Eleanor Roosevelt, that focusing on the war would take away from the New Deal programs and the social welfare and the, you know, what had just been constructed in the New Deal and the whole new orientation of government. So there was a lot of concern, and there was a lot of energy among young people in particular.
Like Henry Wallace, right? That was like a big thing. Like Wallace was the more liberal candidate, and actually I think he even ran as a third party. Anyway.
So
we're going down the route.
Yes, lots to dig into there, but thank you for those suggestions.
You're welcome.
All right, next question. What do we got?
John Obel, what is your favorite idiom? Krystal, Saagar, what are your favorite idioms or phrase? Throw the baby out with the bathwater, take the bloom off the rose. I don't think I've ever said that, that you use in the show. I noticed that you both go through phases where certain ones are used more often. Curious which one you think is the most useful, and if you catch yourself using certain ones too often because you cover similar stories and situations a lot, probably true. I'm not trying to call y'all out for being repetitive. I personally love learning new phrases and descriptors.
I have noticed, so while we're using the phrases, I really don't notice that we're using. I do think that they say bloom off the rose. I think I have said that a couple times recently for some reason.
I feel like I know if you said it.
I know that I've said it a couple times recently. But another thing that I've noticed is sometimes one or the other of us will throw out a phrase that we haven't been using, and then just without even thinking about it, starts to become part of the lexicon that we use. But yeah, I mean, we're really not consciously aware.
Guys, we talk for 2 hours a day.
After the show is over, I couldn't even tell you what we said. Like, by the time we were planning for the next show for the next day, I couldn't even tell you what was in the show on that, you know? It's just like, you do it and it's gone. So I have noticed, because other people have pointed out different phrases that we'll use or words that we'll use, that it does sort of have an evolution to it, that certain language or phrases or idioms will be kind of in our lexicon for a while, then it will phase out and new things will ultimately come in, but we're not really aware of it at the time.
My response is, you try it. You know, talk publicly for 2 hours a day, and we'll see whether you guys have little, you know, idioms and phrases, turns of phrase, ungrammatical errors and other things that don't come out.
That you don't even know.
So you give it a shot and ask your family members.
The other thing that's funny is, my youngest is 5, and especially at that age, they're very much still replicating your language. So she'll say things that I'm like, oh, I do actually say, like, that you don't even realize until she repeats it back to you, and then you're like, oh, I do say that, don't I? I do phrase it that way. Yeah, it is kind of funny. I remember one person had mentioned to us when we were doing live shows previously, they were like, we love it when you say, Krystal, et cetera, which I had no idea that but I do say that. And I write it into monologues. I don't even realize that I write it into monologues. But so anyway, we're oblivious, guys. Wow, that's the bottom line.
See, I didn't even realize, right? I was like, oh yeah, I guess when you say it, I'm like, yeah, you do say that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right.
Last question. Ryan Haynes, political dramas. Hey, Krystal and Saagar, been a big fan of your show since Rising. I recently started rewatching Veep. It got me wondering, what political drama have you seen that are most accurate to the current political environment? Are there any political dramas you guys like? You watch more stuff than I do.
Yeah, Veep. I mean, Veep is the great descriptor.
Yeah.
Selena Meyer is Kamala Harris. Like, they are basically one in the same.
I've only watched 1 or 2 episodes, just enough to kind of get the gist of the cultural reference with Veep. Yeah, it's definitely more Veep than House of Cards. It's definitely not like as high level plotting as like a Game of Thrones or anything like that either. This isn't exactly a political drama, but I will tell you, I just watched the Woodstock '99 docuseries.
Oh yeah, how was that?
It is good.
Is it good?
I might do a monologue
gotta
on
watch
it
it.
because there is a lot there politically. And I actually went back. So Kyle and I watched the '99 one, and then we went back and watched the original 1970 documentary of the original Woodstock that made it sort of like gave it the cultural brand and touchstone status that it became. And it said a lot about the sort of decay of our society and the decadence of the 90s and early aughts, and like just the, also the way that just like capitalism stripped this thing of any sort of other value or meaning. The organizers were just trying to cash in. The concert goers that were attracted to it just wanted like total like nihilism and debauchery. At the end, this is like the perfect crystallization of the whole thing. They handed out 100,000 lit candles to this audience that had been treated like animals for days, with like the water was infected and the porta potties were never clean. There's trash everywhere. So at the very end, after these people have been exhausted and treated like dogs for 3 days, they hand them all out candles because they wanted to make it about a statement on gun violence, against gun violence, because they wanted to pretend in this like very virtue signaling kind of way that they were connected to that original 1969 spirit. And of course, what happens? The concert goers like burn everything to the ground.
Yes.
And it becomes riots and chaos, and they're looting the food stalls and just total, absolute mayhem. So anyway, I remembered at the time the news coverage of it just being, my recollection was that it was just kind of a dud. I didn't remember that it was so like chaotic and violent, and the number of like rapes and sexual assaults and everything getting burned to the ground at the end. Like that part of it I really didn't remember. So anyway, recommend it.
I had no idea.
There was a lot that was interesting there in terms of like a cultural reflection and what happened to that 60s hippie spirit and how it was co-opted and how they sold out. And anyway, so put that out there.
Absolutely.
Worth taking a
Cool.
look at.
Sounds cool. Yeah, watch Veep. The rest of them, I mean, The West Wing is worth watching just to understand people in power, not necessarily that it's a good show. I'm trying to think about it.
Because they all the
Everybody
liberals are
idealizes
still
West Wing.
continue to be
I
like
like-
imagine themselves as characters.
It's fun
in
to
West
watch.
Wing.
I mean, it's fun to watch. It's like a time capsule, in retrospect.
Yeah.
I'm trying. Honestly, there's not a lot. Nobody is worth watching which ascribes any intentionality to most of these people whatsoever. So I would just watch documentaries instead. Those are probably
Yeah, they're not playing 5D chess, y'all.
all right. We'll see you guys later.